All right, everybody, welcome into episode 69 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, the only podcast, and you hear the music right there, the only podcast that covers both American and Brazilian sports. I'm Nicholas Hill, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States, and joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil is Gustavo Tomazeli. And Gus, obviously, big night for us as we are eagerly awaiting the Tennessee Volunteers Sweet 16 game this evening against Florida Atlantic, due to begin in about an hour and a half, give or take.
Yeah, that's true. Big night for the Vols, especially the Big Orange men's basketball team. They are going to face the FAU around 10 p.m. Eastern time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, 10 p.m. here in Brazil. But first, before we talk about basketball, college, and pros, we're going to talk soccer because we have a special guest. He's the Atlanta United play-by-play announcer, Jason Longshore. Jason, thank you so much for joining us on our weekly podcast, talks Brazilian and American sports, and soccer definitely is a big part of our podcast. We're so honored to have you on.
No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So first of all, I want to ask you about Atlanta United. It has been 7 years since they started their journey. I remember I was covering the first inaugural season. I remember how exciting, and then they got their first title back in 2018. So how do you describe this Atlanta United journey, the ups and downs, they got a title. Now I feel they're kind of on a rebuild almost. Like, the big names already left. It's a new generation kind of team of Atlanta United.
Yeah, it's a reload, I think is the best way to put it. I mean, it feels like a normal club now, honestly, because, in this hemisphere anyway, you don't see like one or two clubs just dominate play year after year after year. Clubs will have their ups and downs. And I think MLS, the structure of it with a salary cap, kind of forces some of those ups and downs. And you have to try to navigate those waves as they come. Atlanta United built a great team in its first 3 years where they won 3 trophies, US Open Cup and the Campeones Cup in 2019, MLS Cup in 2018. And then, you had Joseph Martinez have an ACL injury that I don't know if he's ever truly recovered from. And he's not here anymore. And you've had Pity Martinez come and go for a good deal for him to go to Saudi Arabia, but also, a deal where you didn't have to replace him. Ezequiel Barco had moments. I thought he had a really good last season here. Maybe wasn't quite ready for all the expectations that happened, but all of that leads you to Thiago Almada, who is one of the best players I've ever had the opportunity to see live. So it's Atlanta United's like a normal club at this point, a normal big club that will have those ups and downs. But now, if there's anything that's different over these 7 seasons, now we're into season 7, it's that you're starting to see the academy really produce talent. And, it was impossible to expect that straight out of the gate. But now you've got Caleb Wiley, who is having one of the best seasons in the league right now, a teenager. He was in the academy, Gus, when you were here. He was, man, how old would he have been then? He would have been 11. He was in the academy at that time, and now he's killing it with the first team. 3 players from the second team are joining the first team this week due to the international absences. So that's the biggest change is you're going to have players come and go. You're going to have hits and misses, but now you're building a young core straight out of your academy, and it's a blast to see.
And I just wonder how much the support that Atlanta United gets in the Atlanta area really contributes to that. I was down there a few weeks ago, and I was blown away by all the flags you see, all the license plates, gear that you see. I was in an Airbnb in Candler Park, and just it seemed like every other house over there had an Atlanta United flag. Talk about how the team has grown in the 7 years from the beginning when they started off in Bobby Dodd Stadium to what they are now.
Yeah, it's funny because Atlanta has had I think, thriving soccer scene for a long time, but it didn't have the top team. You had the Atlanta Silverbacks for a long time who filled a need in the community, is for sure. Good second division team, but not a first division team. Atlanta's a major league city, and it's hard for, a smaller team to really find their footing. when you have Arthur Blank behind you and the respect that he has in the city, and they build the team the way that they did, you're going to have not just the soccer community support it, but the casual fan. And that's been the biggest thing that I see that separates Atlanta from honestly maybe any other city in the United States, is the fact that you have a daily beat reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm on 92.9 The Game, and we talk soccer all the time. It's just part of the conversation. It's not one soccer show, and that's the only time soccer gets talked about outside of a game broadcast. The Afternoon Drive show, which is one of the biggest shows in the city, they talk soccer. They have soccer guests on. It's just part of the sports conversation now. And that's amazing to me as somebody who was that soccer guy in the community and trying to grow the game. Now, people follow me on Twitter because they hear me on 92.9, where I might talk a little basketball and then I'm talking soccer and I'm making those comparisons. It's awesome to see that happen, to where I think soccer in the United States, it's really easy for all of us who have been in it for years and years and years to go into a silo and say, like, all right, we're going to be underground, or we're going to be small, we're going to do it our way, and we don't care about anything else. What's cool here is soccer is just part of it. There are a lot of casual fans who come to a game for the first time, enjoy it, and then become hardcore soccer fans. And then they might follow a team in Brazil, they might follow a team in England, they might follow a team in Spain. They get engrossed in the culture, and that's been so beautiful to see. And that's what separates Atlanta, and that's why you see the flags, the license plates, the jerseys. I mean, I was driving back from training today, and a jogger just wearing a jersey, just wearing an Atlanta United jersey, jogging down the street. Just so cool to see, and it's easy to take it for granted because we see it so much here.
Again, we're have a pleasure to interview Jason Longshore. And Jason, I was honestly blown away about the call that you made about Thiago Almada goal, because I've been in the United States for 7 years, and I'm a Brazilian, so I kind of compare the way Americans broadcast sports and the way Brazilian broadcast sports, and you have a little sense of Brazilian emotion on your call, and that's something I feel like soccer fans really kind of embrace, that passion on the call. Do you feel that? Do you feel the fans appreciate the way you call the games and the way you experience that?
Yeah, I'm really lucky in the partner I have, Mike Conti, who he does play by play. I do color. I do play by play sometimes as well when there's a conflict. But we kind of fell into this without really strategizing on it. Mike has called a lot of hockey, and he also kind of feels the game. He's listened to a lot of games in Spanish. I grew up listening to games in Spanish because that was all we could get. I didn't have games from England when I was a kid. It was turning on Univision and listening to Cantor and listening to Norberto Longo and hearing it in Spanish. I didn't understand it as a kid, but I heard it and I felt it that way. So when I call a game play-by-play, or when I'm doing color and Mike's calling a game play-by-play, I think we have a very Latin feel, whether it's Brazilian, Argentine, Mexican. It has that feel to it because that's just how we come across to the game. And a good game, it's the coolest feeling, because when it's a really intense game or just a great match, the opener of the season with the late comeback where Almada scored 2 in stoppage time, you should feel exhausted after that because it is an emotional ride. And that's something that we always try to bring across. And I think it's something that we did naturally. And then crazy thing is, calling games during COVID where there was no people in the stands, or we weren't with the team on the road and we were calling it watching a monitor, you had to really focus on that emotion because you didn't have the natural emotion elements of a broadcast. You didn't have the crowd roaring. You didn't have the ups and downs of that. So you had to kind of contextualize the game and bring that emotion and bring it to the audience. And I think that made us in some ways better, honestly, in what we do in conveying the emotion of a game. And you guys know, I mean, it's an emotional game. And I think to try to make someone feel that when they're listening on the radio, especially because radio is such a personal medium, when they're listening on the radio, I want them to feel it. I want them to imagine what we're saying and picture it. And Mike does an amazing job of giving you the picture, and then we try to color in the emotion to it. And I hope that people, when they're driving in their cars or they're listening to us alongside the game, I hope that they feel how we feel. And that's what we try to bring across.
Great.
Oh, go ahead, Gus.
Before you, Nick, I just want to say that's what I try to embrace every day here. That gave me goosebumps because that's what I try to embrace. Because I am the play. We call here the caller comment, the guy who broadcasts the game, the guy who describes the game. I always get confused about the terms. Here in Brazil, we call narrador, which is the guy who says go and stuff. But I always try to. That's the main focus on because when you're a broadcaster TV, you have the image on your side.
Mm-hmm.
You have that on the radio. You have to make the listener imagine and describing. And I know there's nuances on the kind of the sports. Baseball is more like a talk show kind of. You kind of talk with your audience because on baseball it's more like a pace. It's not like there's some moments, but in soccer it's such a fast pace. It's one do. And that's what is the challenge for us that work on the radio in soccer.
I love it. I've called games on TV. I enjoy getting those opportunities to do TV games or games that are streamed. But radio is. I grew up listening to sports on the radio. I grew up listening to baseball on the radio. Sorry, Tennessee folks, but I went to UGA, I went to Georgia, so I grew up listening to Larry Munson call college football, and passion and emotion. That's what you get. So that's how I feel sports. And a lot of times, I mean, Georgia's national title run in football this year, I would listen to the radio. And I loved listening to the radio. And I loved listening to those broadcasts. Scott Howard does an amazing job on those games. It's just, I think if once you get into where you kind of enjoy that, and I have no problem listening to the radio and watching the game too. Like I'll do both. I'll sync the radio up and watch the game. It's just the best who do it, I think, capture the emotion and also enlighten you to things that maybe you didn't know, or maybe you didn't quite see, or maybe you didn't quite get. They'll give you that little bit of info that's just above and beyond. And that's, as doing color as you do, that's where I try to hit it, whether it's, a story about one of the kids coming through the academy that I've seen since they were little, or something tactical that the manager Gonzalo Pineda is setting up for the team to do, or something off the ball that you might not notice, like a run off the ball or a big tackle or what have you, something that might get lost. I try to bring that to the table and just bring people along for the ride. That's always my goal, is to, here I think we have a really interesting situation in terms of soccer on the radio and soccer in just American sports, because there are a lot of people who are coming to it new and didn't grow up with it and maybe don't have that natural feeling that we do. I don't want them to listen to us and feel like, oh, I don't get it, I'm not going to listen, I'm out, I don't get soccer. I want them to join the party. I want them to come in. So, a play might happen and we might, compare it to something that Trae Young does for the Hawks, or something from basketball, or something we might find a comparison that we use as an entry point for folks. And then we'll take them deeper and talk about the 4-3-3 and how it's a double pivot instead of, one holding mid, and try to then go further. We try to hit a very broad audience, and it's a tightrope sometimes, but I think we do a pretty good job of being having a little something there in our broadcast for everybody.
And so, that's been great for people like me, because I didn't watch my first soccer game until I was like 12 or something like that. I didn't grow up with it from I've been watching football since I was like 6. But the same thing with soccer. But definitely, I've come to realize that American broadcasters have become really good at being able to bring people into that sport of soccer. And when you go into a game week, so like this week, Atlanta goes on the road to Columbus. What does that week of preparation look like for you, so that when Saturday night comes and you are in Columbus, you are ready to go and call that game for the fans?
This is a really weird week with the international absences. So a lot of times, it's watching the previous games for the opponent, understanding how they play, what they want to do. So I feel like I'm almost a step ahead when I'm calling the game. But this week, I don't know what Columbus's lineup is going to look like. Their goalkeeper is away on international duty. One of their three center backs is. Their forwards out for a couple of weeks. Their number 10 is out now on international duty. So I don't know what their lineup looks like. So there's a lot of unknown. So it's kind of a weird week in that regard. But my week usually it kind of starts on Sunday, the day after the previous game, where thinking about the content that I'm producing during the week and also preparation, and they both go hand in hand. Like doing regular content during the week helps me prepare for the game. It kind of serves a dual purpose in a lot of ways. So Sunday, I start thinking ahead to what the basic storylines are, players to watch, things like that. I have a radio show on 92.9 The Game on Monday night, so that's kind of the putting a wrap on the previous game and starting the look ahead. So I start to introduce a couple of storylines there. Then training on Tuesday, and this season, the Tuesday training session has been fully open to the media, so you can watch the whole session. And it's not a lot of tactics that day, but you do get a sense of things that they're working on, or maybe certain combinations. Like this week with our lineup challenges with international duty, seeing center back pairing. Okay, I think I know who's going to play at center back. Like seeing what the midfield might look like, things like that. So that Tuesday session is really big, and hearing from a couple players after practice. Then Thursday is where Gonzalo Pineda will speak to the media. Friday, either we travel or we get a chance to talk to Gonzalo separate a little deeper for our radio preparation. And then Saturday's the game, and kind of alongside all of that, I'm taking my notes. I'm making sure I've got all my biographical information on the opposing team. I like to know what their previous club was. I like to know a little bit about them as a player, just a basic profile of what to look for. I like to know how this opponent attacks. So I like to know how they defend, what their basic shape is, a little bit about the manager. That actually helps me understand things really well once I get a sense of knowing the managers around the league. The good thing is now 7 years in, like it doesn't feel as overwhelming as it did in year one with preparing, because players do stick around a while. Like they managers will stick around a while. You start to know the league a little bit more, so it feels like generally it's less preparation than it was before. It's staying current. But then when we have a new team like St. Louis, or a new manager comes in from outside the league, or new players, it's then catching up. So it could be anywhere in total 10 to 20 hours of prep during the week to prepare for a game. And in the game day itself, I like to get to the stadium really early. I like to go over my notes again. I have my notes that I prepare, but I like to handwrite them in my book, and that helps me kind of remember everything. So I'm writing them, but I'm not really looking at the book during the game, if that makes sense. Like it's more of like the actual activity of writing it helps me remember it. And it's there in case I need it, especially if it's a statistic or something that might be hard to remember the actual number. So I do that usually in the couple hours before the game, and just try to kind of gear up for it. And teams come out to warm up. I'm just kind of keeping an eye on it to make sure nothing's weird. Like we had a player in Toronto last year get hurt in the warm up. So, and it was during a run where it felt like we were having injuries every other week. So I'm trying to keep up with that. And then we have a 30-minute pregame before the game starts. So that helps kind of kick you in emotionally, and get the blood flowing a little bit to get ready to rock and roll on the air.
I mean, that's it's kind of reminds me a lot of like what I do. And one thing I definitely want to talk more about, broadcast soccer stuff. But one point that you do mention a lot, which is international duty. And in Brazil, the Brazilian Confederation kind of institute a new kind of rule to the season where when there's international duty, the Brazilian Championship, for example, this weekend was supposed to be the final for the Sao Paulo State Championship, Rio State Championship, all stopped the main tournaments because of international duties. Do you think MLS should embrace that when there's international duties?
Yeah, they typically have. It's funny how that's kind of reversed because in the past, I know Brazil and Argentina and Mexico a lot of times would play through international breaks, and MLS would stop or at least give teams the option to take the week off. And this year, I think it's a couple things. I mean, you still have a little bit of spillover, and the calendar's weird because of the World Cup being where it was, so that has a little bit of an effect. But also MLS is launching a new competition this year that's new and different, and I'm really excited about it. The Leagues Cup. It's a World Cup style format in the summer with the Mexican teams. So it'll be all the Liga MX, all the MLS teams in 3-team groups. Then it'll turn into a 32-team knockout tournament, and that'll be during the summer. They're taking a month off of the season. So the first part of the season, the international breaks, MLS is playing through them. And for a club like Atlanta, that's a challenge because they have 7 players away. You know, for some clubs, they might not have anybody away, or they might have 1 or 2 guys away. So it's a challenge. I don't love it, but it also does, and go back to those young players, it gives an opportunity to some players. And that might open the door for, 3 players from our second team are going with the first team this week. Luke Brennan and Alan Carlton, 2 teenagers who have played really well in preseason and in friendlies. Maybe they get an opportunity off the bench and a trajectory changes. So I don't love it. It's not ideal, but it's kind of the necessary situation this year. I do hope in general, and this is even beyond MLS and the Brazilian League, I do hope in general FIFA and the confederations can find a way to reduce the number of international breaks. Take at least one of them out during a year. We don't need all the friendlies. I get the Nations League has popped up, and now you're going to have the South American teams interacting with the UEFA teams in a Nations League down the road, and CONCACAF has its Nations League. I get it. That's more money for the confederations. I understand. But I hope that some of these extra international breaks where it's just friendlies, I hope they can reduce the number by 1 or 2 each year. I think that would be a big thing for the club game and help.
I mean, in my opinion, Jason, I don't. The problem is, unfortunately, is that UEFA is the biggest confederation for FIFA, and UEFA already kind of established their kind of organization in terms they when they created the Nations League, and a lot of pundits here in Brazil say they kind of close a barrier in terms they with the playing with teams from North and South America and even Africa. They play among themselves. They have their own like that's one of the biggest kind of for example, when Brazil went to play the World Cup, one of the biggest criticisms was that Brazil didn't was challenged during the 4-year period because they couldn't play with European teams. But the issue is UEFA kind of put a shield around it. It's like we have a Nations League, we have Euro Cup, we don't need to play with the teams around the world.
Yeah, and I've seen it in CONCACAF, and I get it in some regards for especially the smaller teams. Like, it gives them competitive games on a regular basis. So I can understand from a political standpoint why countries vote for it and why they want it. I get that, but you're right. It affected Brazil in the World Cup for sure. I think it affected the U.S. and Mexico in the World Cup because you don't get those tests. Argentina was able to overcome it and get through and win everything. But when you only play other teams that are somewhat similar in style to you, it is then a culture shock when you get on the pitch in the World Cup. And I don't know if that's really going to reverse now that we kind of the Pandora's box has been opened. I don't know if that really changes as we get further along, because ultimately it is all about that money. And that's what is going to drive this, for better or worse. That's what's going to drive those decisions.
One trend that I think which is going to stay, and it looks like that with the recent decision of the Copa America being played again in US, is the alliance between CONCACAF and CONMEBOL. I think it's going to deep stronger. And one thing I hope that it happens is the North American team play in Libertadores. Mexico teams used to play in Libertadores. Even American teams used to play. I remember in 2005.
Sudamericana, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember DC United in 2005?
Yeah.
Oh my god! I thought I was the only one who remembered that.
Oh no, I remember that. I love those tournaments. I loved watching Pachuca go on and win the Sudamericana a couple years after that. I think 2007. I would absolutely lose my mind if Atlanta United gets to play in the Libertadores or the Sudamericana, and we get to call those games and bring that to our audience. I mean, when we qualified for CONCACAF Champions League, even getting to go and do those games, the first game that I'll never forget it as long as I live. The first international game we did was in Costa Rica. It was against Herediano, and it was in a stadium that's now been rebuilt. And it's amazing. It's super modern. It was not when we were there in 2019. It was very old. The press box like shook when Herediano scored. It was amazing. I was just smiling the whole time, even though Atlanta United lost and didn't play all that well. It was just the experience of it was so amazing. And to be able to call games in Monterrey, we did a game against Monterrey in that tournament. The night that everything started to shut down with COVID, we were at the Estadio Azteca against Club America, which was incredible in and of itself. Like for me, being an Argentina fan, being in that stadium and getting to go on the pitch the night before and kind of retrace Diego Maradona's goal, like I was in heaven. And then the next night, as we're getting ready to call the game, the NBA is shutting down and everything is falling apart in the world because of COVID. And we have a game to call. It's just international play is such a wonderful thing. And if we ever get the chance with MLS teams to play in Libertadores or in the Sudamericana again, or Copa America, and it's not in the U.S. next time, it's in Brazil, and the U.S. gets to play in that. Just, I think it's a necessity with what UEFA is doing. I'm totally with you. I think it is a smart move for everybody concerned. And if you go back to where the money is and how the money can drive it, there's a lot of money to be had in those tournaments, at least in a strong partnership, if not an outright merger.
I mean, from what Gus tells me about all the Brazilian tournaments like Paulista and, of course, Libertadores, and just learning about all of that, I can only imagine what that would look like in the US. And I almost wonder if the world of streaming is going to help us come to that, because I know MLS this year starting up the new deal with Apple TV. And, I know you're focused on the radio side of things, but what have you been hearing from fans, from other people associated with the league? How are people reacting so far to the unique deal that the MLS has? Because they're really the first sporting league that has gone all in on streaming.
It's fascinating. I mean, as I've been in the industry and started to see how broadcast has changed just in the 7 years since I've been doing this, it's night and day. I mean, streaming was a very minor component of the first TV deal Atlanta United did, where it would be available on like the Fox websites, and you could watch it there if you didn't have it in front of your TV. And now to be all in on streaming, it's a whole different world. I think MLS is ahead of the curve on this, and there's going to be more that follow. I mean, there's talk today about Apple potentially trying to get the Premier League in England next time those TV rights come up. Apple has been talked about with the NBA as well, Major League Baseball. They have a deal with them, but not exclusive. It's going to become the norm in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think MLS, because of the timing and honestly the lack of support they were getting from ESPN and Fox, it made sense for them to go down this road. It's actually really good for us on radio because and next year it'll be all the games, but this year it's the home games. You can listen to us on Apple TV. So I mean, Gus, in Brazil, you can watch MLS season pass on Apple TV, and when Atlanta's at home, you can, instead of listening to the announcers in English or Spanish, you can choose to listen to the home team's radio call. And that opens up so many doors for us. And a lot of fans have taken advantage of that. We've had great feedback from it. So that's been really, really cool. And I think the biggest thing is what Apple provides to MLS is a kind of a blank slate. And it's up to the clubs, especially at the club level, but also at the league level, to tell their own story now, because they have a huge partner who is willing to help them share that story and broadcast it to the world. Whereas in the past, you had to beg local TV channels or beg, local newspapers to tell your story. The league's begging ESPN for better treatment on Sports Center and begging Fox to do more. And now you can do it yourself. And you just have to then bring the audience to it. And it's a really cool situation. Like, it's a month in, so I think they're still kind of working some of the kinks out and improving things as they go, which I kind of expected. But I think they're ahead of the curve, and I think in five years, this is going to feel really normal. And by the end of this deal, in 10 years, this will be what all the leagues will be looking like. And you're right in that when you open that door and you get behind it that way, a Copa Libertadores, Copa Sudamericana, if those competitions go this route and more money starts to come in the door, if they're selling it in a better distribution way to the United States and Mexico, well, then it's going to be a no-brainer to have those clubs in the competition.
And I feel like, you mentioned those tournaments, and they should, because Paramount is one of the TV writers hold the TV rights for those tournaments, at least in Brazil. I don't know.
Yeah, they don't have it here.
That's one thing that I always got when I lived in US. I always felt kind of sad because in Brazil and South America, they don't know how to promote and make it available the tournament to watch. That was something I always felt a little bit angry about it, because I knew that my product was good. I knew Brazilian soccer can be interesting. I know Libertadores can be an exciting tournament, but it's hard to promote where people don't know where to watch. It's sad.
For the longest time, we didn't have Brazilian soccer in the United States. You couldn't watch it normally, very easily. For a while, I think Goal TV had it for a little while. I remember seeing some there.
You had to get the, for example, like Sling and the Brazilian channels on Sling to get. And some tournaments you could, and some you couldn't because they were like different deals. But it's sad that, for example, Brazilian Confederation doesn't have the kind of mentality of MLS, because I feel like there's a good product to promote.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is more available now, luckily. Fanatis has been a really good streaming service that I've used for a number of years. It's how I'd watch the Argentine League. They have the state competitions in Brazil now, which is awesome. Paramount has the Brazilian League in English, which is great. I want to see, and Paramount has the Argentine League as well. Like, Paramount's been interesting in what they've kind of picked up. They haven't gotten the Libertadores and Sudamericana rights yet. Those are still with BN in the United States. But I want to see those two especially lean on to get the English language audience, which I think is there for them if they can market it and sell it properly. I want to see them get like more of a US feel to the broadcast. Like, it's when they have the English broadcasts, it's either a lot of times someone from England, which is a very different feel typically than our US broadcasts. It's just I'd like to see it. I'd like to see them push that a little bit harder. And I think there's other leagues that should look at the model too. I mean, with Fanatis, I'm able to watch on a pretty regular basis, and I love South American football, and I honestly watch more South American football than European football. I'm maybe one of the weird ones here in the U.S. I don't watch the Premier League as much as I watch the Argentine League or the Ecuadorian League. I love those leagues, and I love that game, and I'd want to see more of it and treated better.
So let me ask. Sorry, Nick. I want to ask Jason again, because as you're a fan of South American League, and I don't know how much you follow the Brazilian League, but how confusing is for you to understand the Brazilian soccer system? Because I know it's confusing. I know it's confusing because the roots of Brazilian soccer, it was divided up to states.
Right.
I up until about 1970s, it was more important to win the state championship than the national championship, because the states were so concentrated. The first Brazilian league, the true Brazilian league, was 1971, but the first like state championship was like 1930. So like a 40-year gap of states. And then by then the kind of national championship kind of caught up, and now it's all about the national championship. The state tournament was about like half the season. Now it's like a 3 months kind of 3 months kind of like a preseason tournament.
Mhm.
So, but how for you as American to understand that Brazilian states? I don't know how much you follow the Brazilian league.
I've started to follow it more now that I have better access to it, and I've figured it out kind of quickly. But you're right. Like if you don't understand the history and you look at, I mean, Argentina's very strange as well with their structure, and it changes every year. It feels like in Argentina. Um, you have to understand it because I crack up when I see people freaking out about MLS adding a new playoff team. I'm like, you want a crazy formats? Why don't we go down to Brazil and talk about the state league, and then like players have to play in a certain number of those games. They can't just play a second team in that league. Like guys are committed to play. Then they have their national league. Then there's the Copa do Brasil. I mean, it's just all over the place all the time. And then Sudamericana and Libertadores, because it feels like there's 20 Brazilian teams in those too. You know, you've got to balance all this stuff. And it's exciting to tell those stories. And it's something that, you know, whether it's on my podcast network, Soccer Down Here, and we dig into those and love, you know, kind of getting into the weeds on like second division teams and mascots and having fun with it. Or on my 92.9 show, which is more of a general sports audience. Like I have a segment at the end of that show. It's the 3-4-3, and it's 3 local stories. The last 3 are things about the game that we love, like things that make us smile. But the 4 in the middle, it's just 4 world stories that I just want to touch on that week. And I try to include something from South America in there and try to, again, plant that seed for somebody that might hear it and say, oh, I could watch the Brazilian League. I can watch that on Paramount Plus. I have Paramount Plus because I want to see the Champions League. I could watch the Brazilian League. I'll check that out. And I'm always trying to like grow that, because what we're seeing here in this league with MLS and how it's growing, there's a lot of business between, first it was Argentina and MLS, but now Brazil and MLS. Players, a lot of players coming and going on both sides. And to understand those moves, you have to at least know a little bit about the league that they're going to. I mean, Marcelino Moreno at Coritiba, and you know, we talked before offline about Luis Araujo and rumors with him going and all that stuff.
I know. I bothered you a lot. It's because
no, it kept popping up.
Because they like all the market analysts were like Luis Araujo. And I was like, I'm trying to get my my connection in US to know, because there's so many talks about him. Like I felt, I know it was annoying to ask, but you know how soccer market is. You need to get the information.
I know, and it's funny. Like, you know, that comes up. That was something that Gonzalo Pineda, Atlanta United's manager, was asked about today. Like, you know, Luis has had a really good start to the season. He spoke to the media today too. He's had a really good start to the season. He's such an amazingly talented player, and it felt like the second half of last year, he just had all the bad luck in the world in terms of finishing. He had opportunities late in the season to open games with a goal, and it was either a great save or he just barely missed or he hit the post, and it was just, like he has so much talent and he's about to break through, and it just wouldn't happen for him. Gonzalo said today, like the biggest like change in him, and it kind of goes back to those rumors, because some people in those rumors were saying that he wanted to go back to Brazil. And Gonzalo said the reason why he's having a good start to the year now is he's really happy here. He's really happy. Like he's just in a really good place. So I don't think there was ever anything to that. I think, you know, whether it was an agent who might have planted something, or a club might have planted something hoping it would turn into more, which happens all the time. Like, I don't think there was anything to it. And I'm really happy that we have Luis, and we also have Mateus Osechu, who came up through Paranaense. Like I love that we have a very diverse team here in Atlanta, and people are starting to understand all of these different nationalities and players and personalities.
Yeah, in terms of the future for MLS, just in terms of all the franchises, you know, we're now up to 29 with St. Louis jumping into the fold this year, Charlotte jumping into the fold last year. And for a lot of people are asked, you know, where does the expansion stop? How many teams can you have? Can you have 32 like the NFL? Do you want to step at 30 like the NBA and the MLB? how do you think MLS should move forward with it? And do you think there's going to be a point where you have so many cities that are interested in playing this level of soccer that you could see relegation and a promotion system?
Yeah,
put
I
in?
think you go to 32. I think 32 is comfortable. It actually creates a really good schedule format for you if you want to follow that. So 32, I think, is a no-brainer, and you'll have good competition for those teams, which will bring in good expansion fees, and you can do that in the current model. I think it'll work. I think once you get to 32, or after maybe you decide to go to 32 and you're still deciding who those last two are going to be, or last three are going to be, because Team 30 isn't decided either, then you've got to have a big think about what you do. I don't think we'll ever see a promotion relegation system like we see in a lot of countries. Not everybody has just a pure up and down. I mean, Argentina has the promedios, where it's the last 3 years of record that determine who goes down. Mexico did that, but then Mexico would have somebody like Querétaro would get relegated, and then their ownership would buy the rights of the team that was going to get promoted and just keep the team in Querétaro. Like, it's just ridiculous. So it's like, why are we even doing this? You gotta, like, here, I think the next step is twofold. You've got to continue to grow the system overall, because the country's so big. Like, you're never going to have an MLS team in every big market, but you can have a second division team and a third division team and even a fourth division team that's professional. Like, it can continue to grow, and you don't need to get in the way of that. That needs to continue to grow and mature, and it's doing pretty well. And MLS needs to decide what they're going to do. And look, their business is structured a very specific way with single entity, which I think gave it a ton of stability and a lot of protection for the investments initially. And it's continued to serve a really good purpose, but it doesn't lend itself to a promotion relegation system, because you bought into the league as a whole. You are part of a whole entity, and you can't really get relegated out of that entity from a business perspective right now. Could they have 40 teams under the MLS umbrella and create an MLS 1 and 2? Yeah, I could see that happening at some point. Is that what makes sense for this league in this country? I honestly don't know yet. I love the idea. I love, from a competitive standpoint, what promotion relegation is. I love the romantic stories that we get out of it. Whether it's a Chapecoense coming up and having great seasons, Leicester in England. Like, it's great to see when that happens. But you also have to tell the other side of it when teams get relegated down. And in Brazil, we've seen this with teams, big teams relegated down, and they struggle, and they sometimes can go away. I mean,
Yeah,
Bolton
I,
almost folded in England. Like, it happens.
that's just a personal story. Like, my hometown here, Americana, Rio Branco, used to be in the first division with the state of São Paulo, which was a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
For 17 years, used to play in the third division nationally, and now we're struggling in the fourth division in the state. We're almost kind of and it's frightening, because the city nearby, Santa Barbara do Oeste, also has a team which for 2 years didn't play pro at all. So every year that we got, like, we don't get promoted, we always like, are we gonna come back? Are we gonna come back? Because that's the good part of it. Like, it's the when you don't have a sustainable tournament, sometimes you fear your team just go away.
Mm-hmm. And that's the scary part. And look, I mean, professional soccer in the United States in its current format is really, I mean, started in 1996. It's not that old. The second division was a shambles until, man, I mean, honestly, like 2015. So third division professional soccer is almost brand new. It's only been around a few years. So there's so much to grow. Like, there's very few teams in the second division that could move up to the first division and actually fit right now. And then the fear would be the other way. If first division teams, if the owner of a big first division club gets relegated, do they invest? Do they sell it off? Do they try to go back? It's just, I think we always focus on the competitive side and the romantic stories of promotion relegation, but there is a cost to it, and there is a fear of what it can do from a damage perspective. I don't know if the game professionally is mature enough to handle that just yet in the U.S., and it might not ever handle it in the same way that it does in other countries. It might be a little bit more of an MLS 1 and 2 as opposed to, the because it's a separate business right now. The USL Championship is the second division league in the United States. That's a completely separate business entity than MLS. So, like, that doesn't even make sense right now. The way that soccer grew up here is based on history. You had a lot of failed ventures to have professional soccer in the United States. They failed. MLS created a system that protected investment, which had never happened before. I mean, the North American Soccer League brought Pelé, brought Franz Beckenbauer, brought George Best, brought some of the best players in the world, and it folded. It went out of business, and teams lost a ton of money. When MLS started, they couldn't get enough investment that they had initially targeted. People were not willing to invest in pro soccer at that time. So they had to really work at it and create a structure that protected them. And that's what's helped it grow to where it is now, which is in a really good place. So you don't want to mess that up just yet, just because some other countries do promotion relegation and do a good job with it. There's not any guarantees with that it makes it better, is what I keep coming back to when I think about it. I love the idea. I just don't think we're ready for it yet, and I don't know when we will be.
And I mean, it's great talk with Jason Longshore. I know, kind of, me ask you more questions because I'm so interested about this culture, soccer. For me, Covent Atlanta United, the first season was just an amazing experience. But piggyback on what you said about the North American Soccer League, which was the kind of they started all in the 80s. They had a comeback in the 2000s, and when they folded back in 2015, 2016, around that time, it changed the landscape of the lower tiers of the soccer side. And you also covered Georgia Storm, which is another team,
Yeah.
I think, in the National Premier Soccer League. How much did it change the pyramid of U.S. soccer folding the NSL and the rising of USL?
It's so funny, like you mentioned that, because I mean, the Silverbacks were really my entry point into all of this. The Silverbacks came out of a league before really the USL got to this point. The USL was the USISL. It was very regional, very semi-pro kind of feel in the mid 90s. And there was another league that tried to be as big as MLS turned into, and then MLS got the first division rights, and this league never could really get it together, the A League. And the Silverbacks came out of that league. They were the Ruckus at first. They turned into the Silverbacks. I watched when we first had professional soccer in like my soccer life in Atlanta. The Ruckus was the team in 1995 that started. They had an owner who started the team. He ran out of money before the first game. They had another owner come in, got through the first year. Early in the second season, he ran out of money, started getting rid of all the players. League took it over. They found a new owner. 1997, I worked for the team when I was in college. 1998, that owner stopped paying the bills. The league had to take it away. They found new owners. Then the Silverbacks bought it, and they had owners, and then they added investment, and they did a very good job of being stable for a while. You got to 2008, and they were not seeing a return on their investment. They decided to pull out. USL was having a lot of issues at that time. They were kind of chasing expansion fees rather than stable ownership and stable franchises. So clubs would come and go. And you had a group of owners who said, we want more. We want a higher standard, and we're going to leave and start our own league. And that's what turned into the second version of the North American Soccer League. And the Silverbacks came back into that in 2011 when it launched. So they created the second division, and USL then became the third division, and somewhat by choice, so they could reorganize and kind of get things right. Well, what's funny is from 2011 to 2017, when the NASL folded, that was their last season, it flipped because the NASL came in and demanded high standards, but then very few, if any, of their clubs could actually meet the standards they wanted. So they were constantly like trying to catch up to what they wanted to be. Whereas the USL just kept steadily building and building and building and building and getting it right. And where things really transformed, in my opinion, is in 2013 when the Cosmos came back as an entity and had money to put a team on the field. And the Cosmos were kind of a free agent in a lot of ways in where they were going to go. They didn't have the money to do MLS. They didn't want to do MLS. They wanted to really own their own brand. USL didn't make sense to them, so they came into NASL. Well, the NASL at that time was about to start a partnership with Major League Soccer, and they were going to do a lot of what the USL ended up doing with MLS, having the reserve teams in the league, things like that. And when the Cosmos came to NASL, they said, no, we're not going to do that. If you're going to work with MLS, we're not coming. So everything flipped at the last minute. NASL said no to MLS. MLS then went to USL. Cosmos came into the NASL. USL brought the second teams in, like New York Red Bulls too, did a great job in USL, really raised the standard of the league. Real Monarchs won a championship. You had so many teams come in and do well. USL just continued to grow. NASL never grew. The Cosmos came in and they dominated, and that was about it. When that league folded, USL had already become second division by that point. So USL has continued to grow and continue to grow to the point now that in the past couple of years, they've said, we don't want the MLS reserve teams in our league anymore. We've outgrown that. And MLS had to start MLS Next Pro. So it's a crazy cycle of the business of American professional soccer, of U.S. professional soccer. But I think what's really happened with NASL going away, with USL growing, with USL starting a third division league, with now MLS Next Pro as a third division league, with the reserve teams, but they're going to have some independent teams come back into it. You also have a thriving grassroots culture where, like, Georgia Storm is in the NPSL. In Atlanta, we have the Georgia Storm on the west side of town in Carrollton. We have Georgia Revolution on the south side of town in McDonough. Apotheos is in Kennesaw, kind of northwest of the city. We've had a team in kind of the northeast, further away from the city, in Gainesville, in Limeño. There's also a UPSL Georgia division that has teams all over the state, honestly, but all over the Atlanta area. So you have all these different levels where you can kind of find what fits for you. If you want a very grassroots kind of club and you don't have a lot of money to start it and you want to grow as you grow and just provide opportunities to players, you can go NPSL, you can go UPSL, you can do that and be essentially a fourth or fifth division club. If you have more money, you can go into a more stable professional league like USL, or NISA is a third division league where the Savannah Clovers are going to play this year. So you're starting to get to where, instead of in other countries where you start a club and you rise up through the regional leagues and you keep going as high as you can go, here you can kind of opt in, buy in to whatever level you want to get to. Yeah, that's the pyramid. That's perfect. It's really where I'm so excited is the third tier, the MLS Next Pro, USL League One, NISA, and below. That's where I think it's so fascinating right now in terms of markets that are getting organized high-level soccer, whether it's truly professional like the third division pro, or it is kind of semi-pro or amateur like USASA, like NPSL, UPSL. There's the USL League 2 fits into that too. You're getting pro soccer in all these areas. It's so amazing. Knoxville has a pro team coming in this year in USL League 1, which is very cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to do a Chattanooga and how interesting our situation is
teams.
Here.
Yeah, Chattanooga is a whole nother animal.
I mean, you got Red Wolves in the third tier with USL 1, but you have the FC, which was the original team, down at NPSL. And what's ironic is still is a team on the lower rung of this pyramid is still the more popular team. And there's a huge rivalry that's developed between the two fan bases, even though they never play.
They've never played yet. And Chattanooga FC, they're in NISA now. And NISA has some of its own issues that I hope it can solve, because I think it can really serve a valuable point. And look, maybe NISA ends up between the third division and the amateur. I think that's probably the best spot for it, like a fourth division pro. I think what they can do is really be an entry point for clubs that, like Chattanooga, that grew out of being an amateur team and needed more. And Chattanooga FC's done an amazing job. the Red Wolves have done a great job too. I mean, they've invested in their community and they're developing young players and built a stadium in Eastridge, kind of on the other side of Chattanooga from where Chattanooga FC plays at Findlay. So that's what's so cool about it is I know when the Red Wolves launched, and I understand the frustration from the Chattanooga FC side of things. Chattanooga can, I think, support both. I really truly think they can. And I think there's other markets like that that can support one team, maybe as a professional, maybe one team as a lower division professional, and then multiple amateur level teams and grassroots teams like we're seeing here in Atlanta. So it's the growth is crazy in the Southeast, especially between Nashville, Charlotte, Atlanta with MLS, between Birmingham and Charleston in USL Championship and Memphis, and then USL League One, you've got Greenville and you've got Statesboro, Georgia, and now you've got Knoxville and you've got Chattanooga, and then in NISA you've got Chattanooga and you've got Savannah, and it's just almost all the Huntsville has MLS Next Pro in Alabama. Like, I'm trying to think of markets that don't have it that should, and that's not an easy conversation to have anymore. I mean, you're talking about maybe Macon, Georgia, and Athens, Georgia, and Montgomery, Alabama, and maybe Mobile and Columbus, Georgia, and Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, there's not a ton, and it's so cool to see that growth, because ultimately what it does is it grows the game. It creates more opportunities for fans to support, and it creates more opportunities for players and kids.
And you guys talk about the Chattanooga soccer side, and Chattanooga has a part of history on Atlanta United.
Mhm.
I was there on the first ever
Same.
game. I don't remember if you were there, I bet you
I was,
were. You
yeah.
were. So, but I went there more as like a curious soccer journalist and soccer fan. Go, oh my God, a birth of a team. You know, how was for you, Jason, to go into Chattanooga on that on that day in February 2017? A team was being born that day. What are your thoughts on your mind on that day? Because I know that Red Bulls game was the first home game, but the first ever game, you know, when the referee whistles, like Atlanta United is a team right now. They're playing.
It's crazy to think back to it. And we played Chattanooga FC in preseason this year, and I was having flashbacks in a lot of ways. And I think my connection to it is even more emotional, maybe than yours would have been, because with Chattanooga FC, like, we started the NPSL region that Chattanooga came out of. I was involved in helping to get it started in 2008 with Atlanta SC, and we partnered with the Silverbacks and became the Silverbacks Reserves when they came back as a pro team in 2011. Chattanooga came into that league the second year, and I knew all the people with Chattanooga at that time. Some of them went on to Red Wolves, others stayed with Chattanooga FC. So, like, I had seen Chattanooga. I was at Chattanooga FC's first ever game in 2009 when they played Atlanta SC, and there were maybe 1,500 people there, and it was mind blowing to see that for an amateur game in Chattanooga and in the Southeast. And then to go back 8 years later and see Atlanta United play and see all this red and black in the stadium from Atlanta, just driving up, seeing all the Georgia license plates and all the people before Atlanta United even played a real game with Atlanta United, car flags and everything. It was mind blowing to see that. And going back this year for a preseason game, it was very, very cool to kind of recreate that in a way. I love to see the growth of this, and I think what we're starting to see now that Atlanta United is established is there's Chattanooga FC fans who are Atlanta United fans, and maybe they come down to Atlanta for a couple games a year. I hope that Atlanta United fans who discover the game and fall in love with the team, I hope that they go to Georgia Storm games, or if they're up, on the north side of Atlanta, they go to a Chattanooga FC game, or they go over to Huntsville for a game. I hope that they realize, like, this game that we all love so much, like, yeah, there's differences in level. Yeah, there's differences in resources, but I've seen great games in high school that were better than MLS games that I've called. Like, sometimes you get great games at any level, and those stories are just amazing about this kid that you saw, or this great goal, or this great comeback, or these cool sets of fans, like whatever it is. Like I love the holistic attitude that we're starting to see across soccer in the Southeast. It's just amazing.
Nick, you have any other thought? I don't want to, because I feel like I don't want to get like into Nick's question. It's just I'm such a I mean, I cover soccer in Brazil 24/7. Like Brazil
Yeah.
is a soccer culture. Like
Yeah.
I work on the commercial radio station here in America, and it's a small town, but it's like 98% soccer. So we sometimes talk about, when there's a Brazilian or an athlete from our area, like for example, Cesar Cielo here from our area. He was born in Santa Barbara do Oeste. He was inducted into the swimming Hall of Fame, or we have a good tennis player, or maybe a basketball player. But overall, like, it's a really soccer culture here. That's why I love talking about this kind of soccer and this. And one thing I want to ask you more about is like MLS has a lot of international coaches. Atlanta United itself had had a Mexican coach, now have Argentinian coaches. But why do you think Brazilian coaches couldn't, didn't, kind of broke that barrier? I don't know. Because you are there, you're covering MLS. Why do you think MLS goes more for the Mexican or the Argentinian coach, but not for any Brazilian coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the Mexico side of things, I get it because of the shared border and shared culture, and it's just common now for Mexican players or Mexican American players, and then sticking around in the league and coaching. I mean, Gonzalo Pineda is a prime example as a great player in Mexico, national team player, World Cup player, came to MLS, came to Seattle, played in Seattle the last few years of his career, still had a lot to give, and then after doing a year in broadcast, he joined the coaching staff and started as an assistant and worked his way up. I get that. And I think with Mexico, there's always going to be that. I think Argentina and MLS, there's always been that connection, even going back to the early days. We've seen Argentine players come into this league from a very early time in the league. I think Argentine coaches in general, I think you see Argentine coaches in a lot of places, not just MLS. I mean, I always think of Peckerman in Colombia and what he did, and he goes to Venezuela later on. But I think seeing Argentine coaches anywhere is not a huge shock. I think in terms of Brazil and MLS, that relationship has been slower to build. And honestly, I think the biggest reason is for so long, Brazilian players were kind of out of the reach of MLS in terms of cost. So you just didn't get many Brazilian players in the league, and you didn't get the older players at the end of their career coming in. Very rarely you did. We saw
I think that,
Juninho,
yeah,
saw
I feel like
Bronco.
Kaká was kind of like the like the before and after. He was I feel like the biggest
It's
name that.
Yeah, it started to kind of that's a good point. It started to kind of open up a little bit there, and I think the economics started to change around that time too, to where MLS teams were spending more money, and Brazilian teams were also more willing to sell to MLS. So, like, it felt like over a couple of year period there, you went from the only Brazilians who would come in were guys who had some kind of connection to working to MLS from outside of Brazil, like maybe they went to Europe and then came here, or you'd get those older players who would come in. Well, then you started to see guys like Brenner and young guys come in, and Hosechu, I mean, here in Atlanta, like that was a move that wouldn't have happened in MLS 5 years earlier. And he's, he was a player. It played in Sudamericana and Libertadores, and came up through Paranaense, and just was always kind of right behind the main guy. And the main guys who were coming through that club were very good and went on to big clubs in Europe. He came here for, it wasn't a huge financial deal, but it was a decent one, and he's a really good player here. He's a nice fit into this league. He's not a superstar, but he's a good starting level player. And I think the business of MLS has caught up to that point to where it can be not quite equal. There's always going to be, I think, a kind of a surcharge for top Brazilian talent. If you have that Brazilian flag next to your name, you're probably going to sell for more money, and that's anywhere in this hemisphere. But The players below that, they see what other players have gotten by coming to MLS. Miguel Almiron, coming into MLS and then going to the Premier League. It can be a launching pad for maybe that next tier underneath. And the business between MLS and Brazil is really continuing to grow. And I think we'll see more coaches who follow after.
And for me, like, one of the biggest pitches they can talk about Brazilian player is that you can have a solid career in America, because here in Brazil, it's a dream to live in the United States of America. You know, you want to make out of there, and I feel like that could be appealing, at least for me. I always think about that. But one team that I feel like kind of got the right players from Brazil, and they got a title, I feel, out of this, was New York City FC. They got like Thales Magno was mind blowing. Thales Magno was like one of those young players I ever thought I was sure gonna play in Europe, sure was gonna play in the Premier League or La Liga. I know he got a little injury issue, but when New York City FC got, that was astonishing for us Brazilian journalists that cover soccer, and it paid off, because I feel like that was one of the big reasons why NYCFC got that title, at least in my opinion.
Oh no, I completely agree. He's an incredible talent, and they've done a really good job. And look, having the City Football Group behind you helps a little bit, and it might be more appealing for some of those players like him and Santiago Rodriguez from Uruguay, who see potentially, okay, maybe through CFG, then I can get to Europe that way and find my way over and make it work. But also, I mean, again, I really think Miguel Almiron opened a lot of doors to all South American players of, hey, I can go there for good money and be paid really well. And if that's the highest I go, that's fine. That's going to be a good life. But if I do really well, and this league is seen in Europe, I know MLS is seen more in Europe than Liga MX and the Argentine league. I believe it's seen in Europe more than the Brazilian league. So if you can go to MLS, get into a bigger spotlight and do really well, it might be even better to get to Europe that way, and you might make more money on that other end. I think young players are starting to realize that and be more willing to come to MLS.
No, I completely agree with you. I feel like that could be. I mean, Brenner, you mentioned, that was also a young, promising player that nobody was expecting to go to MLS. There's a little bit of prejudice here. I feel like in Brazil, still, MLS is not seen as like this top destiny. People, I feel like it's a little bit unfair and harsh, but a lot of like Brazilian soccer pundits see MLS like, oh, their career going down, or oh my God, this player has so much potential, they're playing in the United States. I feel a little bit unfair. I feel like they don't see the full picture.
Yeah, it is. It's unfair. It's outdated now, I think, and it happens in Argentina too. It happens in Colombia. It's not a purely Brazilian thing there. I mean, Mexico still tries to say that too, but you're seeing more and more young players come here rather than Liga MX. It's marketing, I think MLS is catching up, but there's still some of that old perception that's out there. Players that continue to come here when Brenner gets his deal in Europe, which I think will be this summer, that will change perception. When Thiago Almada, and he's probably going to be the really next big one that changes perception. When you have a World Cup winner in the league, I know he was, kind of at the end of the squad for Argentina and played in one game, but he still was an MLS player, and he's come back and he's killing it. And he's going to go for big money in Europe when that time comes. That's going to open the door to even more young players saying, that's where I want to go to then make my move to Europe.
No, and to your point, Jason, because like you mentioned, Thiago Almada, he was playing MLS and goes on the roster of Argentina World Cup. And Argentinian player has more chances to go in the national team playing MLS. For example, in Brazil, I don't know if you know German Cano. He's playing for Fluminense. He's been incredible. He's been scoring goal after goal after goal. He's probably the best striker in the Brazilian league last season. He was not even considered on the Scaloni team, not even considered. We had Dario Conca, D'Alessandro, so many players. It's a joke here. When an Argentinian player steps foot in a Brazilian team, it's like they're forgotten in the national in the national team.
Yeah,
they're forgotten.
It's true, and now like that started to change. And I mean, Pity Martinez coming here when he was still part of the Argentine national team, Barco with the youth national teams, like. it's now not that shock when you see an MLS player in the Argentine national team. Now, the next one will be Brazil, honestly, and that's a huge bar to happen because of the sheer level of talent and the number of talented players. But when that happens, then all those old perceptions, all those old ideas that you can't go to MLS, it's going to be bad for your career, all that will go away. And it's going to take time. I don't think MLS needs to chase it. It's going to happen organically. I like the growth pattern that they're on. I like that you have clubs with different personalities. I love the South American game personally, but you're like what we're seeing in St. Louis. You do have a Joao Klaus in St. Louis, who's a really interesting player who's doing well. But they went kind of with the German counterattack, or not counter, but more pressing and counter pressing style of play. Philadelphia subscribes to that. The Red Bull teams, obviously, like I like that you have a league with a lot of diversity in playing style, a lot of diversity in the types of players that the league has, and it's a league with a salary cap. So it's a league where you go into the season and really, truly, anybody has a chance to win it. You have some teams that have better rosters than others, but because of a cap and because of the playoffs, it's really not impossible, but it's really difficult to go into the season and say, well, this team has absolutely no chance to win anything, and it's a hopeless year, which is what we say about a lot of teams in a lot of leagues worldwide.
Yeah, like here in Brazil, the Brazilian league did not even start, and we know it's going to be or Palmeiras or Flamengo or
Who
maybe
the top two are
it's
going to
Mineiro. We know
Yeah.
when Brazilian league starts, it's going to be one of those three. Like it'll be a major upset if not one of those three teams. Like I like the parity the MLS created. That's one of the things I feel like, and playoffs. And I mean, one of the things I like about MLS that they didn't embrace about the European the style, even the South American side, is like playoffs. Brazilian league should come back to that. Up until 2002 was playoffs.
I
When we
love
started, yeah, it was so funny when Brazil got rid of playoffs in the league. That was after was literally the same year that we won our last World Cup. Was kind of like interesting coincidence. When you got rid of playoffs in our national championship, that's when we kind of didn't win the World Cup. It's like weird. I know it's not like it's a coincidence, but not connected to it because World Cup is such a weird event. But playoffs is something that I feel like in soccer should be more embraced. I know it's like European leagues are not going to change, but I hope Brazil. But last question I have to ask, because I know a lot. I want to talk all day about soccer, and I love having you on.
I do have like an interesting point to bring up. It was interesting how you brought up the diversity of styles in the MLS, and I think that's just a reflection of the U.S. as a country. Because I think every country's soccer style is a reflection of just the country as a whole, and the U.S. is the melting pot. So it almost would make sense that we would have like all these styles, and I'll be curious to see if that ends up really latching on to soccer fans around the world. The MLS is this unique product just because of how the U.S. is just a unique country.
Yeah, I think in some leagues, like the story in England, for example, was always like, you can't bring a Brazilian player to England because they can't handle the cold. They can't do it on a cold night in Stoke, and like all the dumb cliches that you can imagine, which we know isn't true, but it's a perception. In MLS, you can bring Brazilian players in. You can bring Norwegian players in. You can bring African players in. You can bring Asian players in, American, U.S. based players who can be like all of those different places and probably have that heritage. I love it. And it's what is such an exciting thing, I think, covering a team in a local market like Atlanta, to where, we bring in a player this year from Greece, Yorgos Yakimakis, played in the Netherlands, played in Scotland. He was last with Celtic, comes here. He's Greek. We'd never had a Greek player before. So then, like, when I was a kid, I learned about the world through the World Cup and through soccer. And I've never been to Argentina, but I fell in love with the game because of that Argentine team in 1986. That was the first team I really saw. And that was the first World Cup that I saw. And I fell in love with the game, and probably in a lot of ways fell in love with the country because of that. Because like you say, a national team in a lot of ways, and in most cases, reflects its country. And there's things about the Argentine game that I love, that I've grown up on with the game. And I love that now here in Atlanta, kids today, will learn. They'll see, oh, he's Greek. What's Greece? Tell me about Greece. I don't know anything about Greece, and they'll want to learn about it. And Brazil and Argentina, and now we have a Peruvian player in Luis Abram. So you're going to get all of this knowledge of all these different cultures coming together and forming a team. It's so exciting to see. It's so cool to see it play out with all these different. I mean, 7 guys on international duty for Atlanta United, and all of them are with different places. It's Argentina, it's Greece, it's the United States, it is Peru, it's South Sudan with Machop Chol, with Venezuela with Ronald Hernandez. It's so amazing to see that level of diversity. It's exciting.
That's just a quick score update for any Tennessee fans in the audience. Kansas State and Michigan State are going to overtime at 82.
I was worried about keeping you guys from the game, so good.
Oh no! Well, they are going to overtime, so the Vols game is going to be late.
Okay, cool.
It's like I'm loving this conversation, Jason, because I love to hear those kind of thoughts about soccer pundits from America. I'm being kind of covering soccer in Brazil, and let me ask you about. So, what do you kind of like watch? Any team that you know about Brazilian soccer? Because I love to know what the world know about our league. Because I know we know about Neymar and the best, but our league, I love to know what the American and a great soccer pundit like you know, kind of like our league or our teams. Like, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, there hasn't been a team that has like purely captured my heart in Brazil. Like, I don't have a team that I follow specifically. I'll tell you that in their run to the Libertadores title a couple of times now, I did not enjoy Palmeiras and their style of play at all. Did not like it at all. I was definitely rooting for Flamengo in those games because I like a team that wants the ball. I like a team that wants to attack. I like a team that tries to entertain. And those Palmeiras teams, not entertaining at all.
I'll say this though, that was a fair criticism that a lot of media pundits did about Abel Ferreira.
Yeah.
When he got to Palmeiras back in 2020, he was a defensive style of coach. I just said though, if you watch them now, they're more offense. They have better, like they have Hendrick, which is already sold to Real Madrid, which show Palmeiras Academy has developed this great talent in the offensive. But it's a fair criticism. It's a fair criticism about Albert Ferreira, which he was very defensive though, but now he's kind of morphed into more offensive kind of style of play. He's like in a 4-3-3. He lost Scarpa and Danilo, which were very key players in the offense. He's trying to rebuild the offense. He's in another state championship final. Like it's so funny. Palmeiras fans joke that they don't have any rivals because they're winning the Brazilian league, winning the state championship. They were to make the Libertadores final. They got a really weird match. They lost to Atlético Paranaense. One of those like playoff matches that you don't understand how they lost, but they did. But they're like and they don't invest a lot of money. It was funny. Palmeiras a couple of years ago, back in 2017, 18, 19, they spent a lot of money, but they didn't got the titles. They got the right coach. And the biggest criticism about Palmeiras president, which is a woman, Leila Pereira, which is that fans are like, where are the signs? Where are the new players? Where are the new I feel like it's so unfair, but it's a good criticism he did. Like Palmeiras, it was a very defensive style. Now it's a different. But I want to tell a story about the team that Palmeiras is going to play next week, and I told Nick about it. Agua Santa in the finals.
Okay.
They were in the amateur. They not only in the I'm not saying they are in the 4th division nationally. Not only in the state division, they were playing amateur league, like city league. I don't know if the Atlanta have like a city league.
Yeah.
Like they were in the city leagues for like 1981 to 2011. They went to the professional side in 2013, and this 10-year period, they got to the first final in the state championship, which a lot of teams like Rio Branco has been in 100 years. They never make it. That's one of those stories that you love about soccer.
Yeah, I love that stuff. that's what I love digging into and learning about countries that like I don't have a team that I follow. Like I love finding those underdog stories and getting into those. In Argentina, Tigre was a team like that, and Retegui goes to Italy now and scores a goal in his debut in the national team. But Tigre won the Copa Argentina in a year that they got relegated from the first division. Like that stuff. And when oh man, I wish I could remember it. A lower division team beat a first division team in the Copa Argentina not that long ago. And they showed the captain speaking to the team. I think they're semi-pro would be the level. I think it's fourth division in Argentina, which is scattered all over the country. It's really unorganized. But these guys would go and train early in the morning and then go to work. And that's kind of the life that they live. And they had this camera in the locker room, and I saw the subtitles of it in English of the captain speaking to the team before the game. And it's, the typical like trying to gear everybody up, but it was just so passionate and so exciting. And they won 1-0 in the Copa Argentina, probably had one shot in the game and just holding on for dear life. And they got the win. And I love hearing about teams like that. If there's a team that I'm starting to pay more attention to, it's probably Paranaense. And it's a lot because of Hosachu here in Atlanta, but also I know they're a club that has really always focused on developing talent. And in Ecuador, a team that, Independiente del Valle, obviously, with what they've done. I love those kinds of teams and stories. That always grabs my attention.
Oh, Independiente del Valle. Us Corinthians fans, I'm a Corinthians fan. we were so good because they beat Sao Paulo in the Sudamericana, and now they beat Flamengo against Vitor Pereira, which is he's the biggest traitor of all time. Don't want Vitor Pereira head coach on your team. He's a traitor. That's the story. Look at this story. He was a Corinthians coach. He was very successful. He went to the Brazilian Cup final. He was doing good, but then he didn't renew his contract. And the story was that his mother-in-law was not feeling well in Portugal. So he was like, oh my God, I have to step aside soccer. I have to, look out for my family in Portugal. No. And then a month later, he was like signing with Flamengo. And now all Corinthians fans hate him. And everybody Flamengo loses. It's not that we hate Flamengo. It's that we make jokes about him like, hey, Vitor Pereira, how's your mother-in-law doing? Like,
and this dude can't win a championship to save his life either.
It's so bad when that stuff happens. And that's, but like that, those are the stories that we love about this stuff, right? Those are the stories that we love to tell. And like, I hate this team because they stole their coach. And he said his mother-in-law was sick and that's why he left. And she wasn't. It's like Urban Meyer leaving Florida, and leaving Ohio State. Like, I'm sick. I have these problems. Oh, here's a fat check to go coach this team. I'm in. I feel better now. It's like, come on.
And then he did it again to Ohio State.
Yeah, he did it again. Like, and they fell for it again. It's so bad. But that's what's crazy about sports. That's what's crazy about all of it. It's so fun to follow. I love learning these stories, and it's something that I'm glad we're starting to get to in this country with the history of the game, where we're starting to have some of these stories of our own. The upsets in the U.S. Open Cup, and seeing a guy like last night, I was watching a game in the Open Cup in the first round with Kwajo Poku, who played for the Silverbacks back in the day and played for New York City. And like, he's playing for an amateur team in Nashville. And I'm like, how did that happen? What? And that's where he ended up, and that's where he's playing right now. I love all of it, because that's the thing about soccer that I think is so different than our other American sports is it goes from top level all the way down. I mean, even here you've got the schools and the kids and all that playing, and there's little storylines in every one if you dig into it. Little fun stories, little fun facts, little fun bits of history.
And I love U.S. Open Cup. It's my favorite U.S. tournament. I'm just mad that Knoxville finally get to have a team in there, and I'm not there to cover. I'm sad, but it's life. It happens.
I'm hoping we get to go to Knoxville. I'm waiting to see. We come in the third round. Knoxville. I can't remember who they're playing in the second round.
Is it April 4th? I think they're playing the
It's
second round.
it's that week. The 4th, 5th, 6th is the second round. I can't remember who Knoxville's playing, but once the draw
Memphis,
happens, like,
Memphis
oh, they got
901.
Memphis. Yeah, and I
I
know Memphis
really
a little bit.
what I need to do is so when Knoxville comes to East Ridge on April the
Yep.
8th, I need to go over to that game.
Yeah.
Let's check out those teams.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's again, like that's what's cool about it. Like when we start to look at, I was talking about this on my show. Like, okay, Atlanta United's going to come in the third round. They might play because it'll be somewhat regional. Like they might get drawn with Savannah. They might get drawn with South Georgia Tormenta and Statesboro. They might get drawn with either the Chattanooga teams or Knoxville or Memphis or Birmingham or Greenville. Like that's so cool. Like, you know, if I want to call a game from one of these places, there Appalachian FC won last night in Boone, North Carolina. Okay, cool. I want to go to Boone, North Carolina to call a game. That'd be a blast.
Yeah, it's like we have Brazilian Cup now. It's kind of like that too. It's not as expanded as U.S. Open Cup. I wish it was, but
Yeah.
you see those stories on the Brazilian Cup, like a team from the fourth division beats a team from the first division, and it's a party in the city, and like never something like never happened before, and like I hope like my team Rio Branco never play in the Brazilian Cup. One day I hope they get to play in the Brazilian Cup, but first we have to come back at least to the third division in it. So if you have a team you want to follow, Rio Branco Sports Club, that's my team. They have American roots because Americana was founded by people running away from the Civil War in the South. They founded Americana in Santa Barbara do Oeste.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's why my city is called Americana. Was founded by Americans running away from the Civil War and established themselves here. So we have a little bit of American roots, we can say here in my town.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. Okay. Now I have a lower division Brazilian team to follow. I'm good.
I'll send. Hopefully, I won't send a t-shirt. The season started on April 22nd, but the biggest game is on April 29th, which is a day on my calendar. That's the derby here. We call the derby between Americana and Santa Barbara. We share lines on city lines, and they've been outside of professional soccer for 2 years. And I'm waiting for calling this game, and I'm calling for like the main radio station Americana. I'm like, I cannot wait, and I'm gonna send you the link when that happens because you're gonna see my reactions to it, and I'm gonna be full emotional. And even my fellow colleagues on the radio is like, "Calm down, Gustavo," because I get emotional. I mean, I cheer for Rio Branco. I want Rio Branco to win, but I mean, so let me 1 second. I'm gonna show the T-shirt, by the way, from Rio Branco.
Okay.
Well, let's pull it up. Quick score update: 94-92, Kansas State. Under a minute left in the first OT.
Ooh,
so will they go to second OT? Wait and find out.
They might.
Also, in the other semi, UConn is absolutely destroying Arkansas, 71-46.
Oh, I'm good with that. Okay, I like it. Nice.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very classic jersey.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the last year's one. That's the jersey they wore last year, which they did a bad job. It was a bad season. We qualified for the second round, but then we lost 5 out of the 6 games from that second round. So that was a terrible season, but we hopefully to get back this season. Jason Longshore, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Thanks for having me on.
It was a fun time, and so it's going to be on Saturday. Next Atlanta United game, you're going to call, right?
Yeah, Saturday night. You can listen on the Odyssey app. You can listen to us anywhere. We're going to be on Star 94 this week, which is our sister station. Hawks basketball on 92.9 bumps us over. But you can always listen on the Atlanta United app too, which you can download anywhere, and you can go to the radio, listen to English language radio there. And like I said, when we're at home in Atlanta, and we'll be there the following week, we host the Red Bulls. If you watch on Apple TV anywhere in the world, you can listen to the home radio call there and listen to our call there. So can't wait. We're traveling to Columbus tomorrow, and hopefully decent weather. It's supposed to rain. It always rains when we go to Columbus, but should be a fun game, and hopefully Atlanta can stay undefeated.
I hope that too. I always have good memories. Look, I have my LA United
I saw.
hat. I have some flags. That was season 2017. I make the drive for Knoxville to Atlanta many times during the 2017 season, and that Bobby Dodd Stadium atmosphere. I like Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a great stadium,
Yeah, it's incredible.
premium, but the Bobby Dodd Stadium feeling, that atmosphere was. I got goosebumps. It remind me of the Brazilian kind of passion and intensity. But good luck calling the game on Saturday, and thanks for having you, Jason.
Thanks so
Yeah, thank
much.
you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
coming
me on. Oh, thank you so much, and we'll do it again soon.
Definitely, that was Jason Longshore, play-by-play for the Atlanta United. Sorry, Nick, I talked so much, but I got
Oh man,
excited.
no. Yeah, I mean, look, it's not every day that we get to have a sitting play-by-play announcer of a major American sports team on the show. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
So
And
let's go
and
ahead.
let's just kind of get through all the other soccer topics because you alluded to it during the show. But one, Knoxville SC has come back from the dead. They have made actually no, not back from the dead, but they have made their debut and they won 2-1 over Lexington XC. Just talk about like how hard is that for a new team to win in their first game?
Yeah, Atlanta United did not win their first professional game. We I just mentioned in our Jason interview, they lost 2-1. So it's kind of nerve wracking the first game. You have, and especially when it's at home. But I'm curious what they're gonna do in April when they have to host their first playoff game versus Memphis, which is one division above. That was gonna be Rio Soccer Stadium is gonna be. I mean, I wouldn't miss it for the world if I was in Knoxville.
Absolutely, and I can't wait until they get to their own stadium because I know they're going to be sharing the Old City Stadium with the Smokies when that's completed. And I was there a couple of weeks ago, and you can tell like how they're already starting the construction over on that side, James White Parkway. So it's going to be really exciting to see what that whole area of Knoxville is like. I guess while we're on the topic of soccer, because we're about to just dive into a whole bunch of hoops, there's kind of you alluded to it, Agua Santa. They have
Wow.
we talk about March Madness. The slipper still fits. The Giant Killers have made it to the finals against Palmeiras. Now it's a 2-round final. So, what does Agua Santa have a chance to win it all in Paulista?
I feel like they have 25% chance because as you said, it's home. It's not going to be even a home and home game because Agua Santa does not get to host the first leg of the finals because their stadium is not equipped enough. Don't have these standards to host the final. They're trying to still find a stadium. Morumbi, which was the closest stadium, the São Paulo Stadium, which is I feel like the closest stadium from Diadema. Their grass is rebuilding. I think they're gonna host again in Santos like they did in the semifinals. I feel like it's the closest city they can host. I feel like it's gonna, but I mean, Thiago Carpini has done a tremendous job. He's a coach that I feel is gonna get a top gig really soon. He's done a tremendous job in Inter de Limeira with a really lower budget, got the team to the quarterfinals. He did a good job in Guarani. So I feel like he is gonna be in some big teams. He got his contract renewed until 2024. So he want to stay in long term. But I don't know when a big team come calling. I don't know if he's going to stay in Agua Santa. But Agua Santa is a great story. I watched this team born professionally. Like we talk about Atlanta United being born. I watched this team play their first ever game in Diadema and all the uncertainty. Are they going to make it? Are they going to be competitive in the professional level like they were in the amateur level? And they are. Like Rio Branco is 110 years old. They still have not made it to a Paulista final. And Agua Santa, with 10 years in the professional world, has made it. I think Palmeiras is going to win the final because it's in 2 games. Palmeiras is just a better roster, the better team. There was a level of uncertainty because Agua Santa didn't know if they were able to have that players that they have because the transfer window was going to finish on April 3rd. And so by then the players had to be signed by the new team. But Brazilian Confederation made an exemption of Agua Santa. Like, okay, Agua Santa, you can play the Paulistão final with the current roster. After that, the players that are in your roster right now can transfer to a new team up until April 10, which is literally the day after the final. That was something good.
Yeah. Now I do also have to bring up as well on the other side of things the Bragantino keeper. What in the world was he doing on the goal that he gave up?
Oh, he's just a mess. Like, I have a stat that Clayton, he's a 25 years old. 25 years old, is the player with the most defensive, the biggest defensive errors from the like database of SofaScore. Like within 46,801 players, Clayton Bragantino keeper is the player with the most big defensive errors since 2022. He suffered in 71 games, 94 goals, 7 errors generated those goals, 2 own goals, and 2 penalties that he did commit. So he's a track record of making mistakes.
I mean, as you were telling me the other day, you're surprised that he's still the starting goalkeeper at this point. I mean, especially to make a mistake in a game of that magnitude, and that's the only reason why Agua Santa had the chance to go to penalties and win, is because of that mistake. I mean, Bragantino, for all intents and purposes, it should be in the final against Palmeiras, and to
be honest, Bragantino was controlling the game. They had full control. They opened the score with 7 minutes. They were in total control of the game, but one mistake cost them the final, and it's something that Red Bull franchise have to keep aware. Bragantino, with all the investment and like in all the investment, and people are like, oh, Bragantino is going to be this huge, powerful team that is going to dominate Brazilian soccer with all the investment. I haven't seen it. Again, they are eliminated in the state semifinal. They made the year before, second time in a row they are eliminated in the semifinals in the state championship. Last year was to Palmeiras, okay, a big team, but now it's to Agua Santa. And last year they didn't fall the relegation zone, but they did a really disappointing Brazilian league. And I don't know how much expectations are going to be kind of met with this Red Bull Bragantino, with so many investment, but not seeing any kind of major step, like winning a Paulistão, winning a Sul-Americana. They went to the final Sul-Americana, they lost. Like, they have to make a major breakthrough to show they are for real this kind of big team. I haven't seen yet.
If they don't break through, would Red Bull ever pull out their funding for that team?
I don't know, because they have made good investments in terms of getting young players from not that expensive and selling expensive. Like, they sold Claudinho to Zenit. Now they're gonna sell Arthur. Palmeiras want to buy it. Like, even Qatari team wanted to buy Arthur for like $10 million. I think Red Bull as a company that looks also to make good investments and returns are kind of satisfied, but I don't know how much the fans are gonna kind of be patient about not making any breakthroughs or getting titles. It's like all this excitement and kind of hope and all this investment, but nothing to like, oh my god, we got this title, we got this historical run. Like, I haven't seen yet. But
breaking, Kansas State has won. They won 98-93 in overtime. If the Vols win, their opponent will be Kansas State.
And just to while we're at it, we're going to talk about a lot about hoops in a little bit. But just to finalize soccer, it's going to be a big game on Saturday. 15 de Piracicaba and Ponte Preta, kind of the black and white region derby from Campinas and Piracicaba, which is in the same area. It's going to be a big game on Saturday. I'm excited to call it. It's going to be for the promotion for the first division in the state also. And so Palmeiras Agua Santa final is going to be next weekend, as also the Rio State Championship. All is stopped, as I said earlier in the Jason interview, because of international friendly games. So the Vols are going to play in a little bit against Florida Atlantic. What is your hopes about this game, Nick?
Yeah, well, let's kind of just talk about how they got to this point, right? Because they had to survive Louisiana last Thursday night, and a game that they had under control. They were up by 18 in the middle of the second half. Then the Raging Cajuns got hot. They went on a 13-0 run, and the Vols, they struggled to score down the stretch, and they really had to hold on for dear life, and they managed to. And we kind of got lucky that Louisiana couldn't really hit any frees for the majority of the game because our offense was just terrible. Vescovy was in foul trouble the entire night, but they won, and that's all that matters in March. Because as we see from game to game, teams completely change at a dime, especially this version of the basketballs. On Saturday, they came out and absolutely bullied Duke. Duke, they really only play 6 guys. They're a bunch of freshmen and one senior, and that inexperience really showed because Tennessee, from the opening tip, absolutely dominated and bullied Duke the entire time. And of course, Olivier Kamwa down the stretch was just clutch. At one point, he scored 15 straight points for Tennessee. Just a special performance, his best game as a volunteer, definitely the best time to have your best game in March. And I guess the question is, for the Vols heading into this game with Florida Atlantic, exactly what team's going to be there? And that's been the question all year. Unfortunately, we had a situation last week where we didn't have our best shooting night in the first round, but fortunately we were paired with a team that also didn't shoot very well. And then the second go-around, our defense really turned it up. So now you're in the third round. You're coming up against Florida Atlantic, a team that has a really good offense. They do score a lot of points. They are 33-3, but a lot of those wins are not against the best competition, but they are still a pretty good team. They did kind of benefit, obviously, from one of the biggest, if not the biggest upset in March Madness history, which I want to get into here in just a minute. But, they're here, and they're here in about 25 minutes, so roughly 9:30-ish. The Vols are going to be taking on the Owls of Florida Atlantic, and my gut feeling, in terms of how I think this game will play out, I just, even from an objective standpoint, would pick the Vols to win this game. Obviously, they got more big game experience. They're more athletic. They're bigger. But obviously, you have to worry about just FAU get hot. If they start draining frees, obviously that would be a problem for our defense. But I really think from the beginning of this game, we have to, kind of like with the Duke game, just really make them uncomfortable. And if you've listened to what the coach, Dustin May, for FAU and some of the players have said for FAU, in FAU's post game against Farley Dickinson, they were like, we got to be ready to play an Australian football game to play against the Vols. There was a player that said that he thought the Vols played dirty. And you already know that in their heads, they're already thinking, oh, this is going to be a physical game. It's going to be a tough game against Tennessee. And I think you got to come out and you got to smack them in the mouth and confirm that, you're in for a war tonight. And kind of like what we did with Duke. And Duke, I just don't think ever really recovered offensively from that. And you got to smack them in the mouth and see if FAU is willing and able to respond. So we're going to wait and see what happens. Obviously, this is a huge night for the basketball program. Only once before have we won in this round. We're, I think, 1-8 in the Sweet 16. The only time we won was 13 years ago. Ohio in the Sweet 16 against Ohio State and St. Louis. And then 2 days later, we lost to Michigan State, who, ironically, and I was kind of hoping they would win, because it would have been the most full circle moment if we had played Michigan State again.
No, I'm good, Nick. I feel like, as we said, our demons are killing themselves. Purdue eliminated before we play them. Michigan State. It's a sign.
Maybe it is. And now what stands before you to get to the Final Four is Florida Atlantic and Kansas State. If you had told me in the preseason that we reached the Sweet 16 and the two teams ahead of you for the Final Four are Florida Atlantic and Kansas State, I'm like, oh, that's an automatic Final Four. But obviously, the two teams are way better than anyone thought they were going to be. They've earned the right to be here, and the Vols are going to have to play their best in the Garden to advance. And we're going to learn tonight, if the boys can handle the pressure. Because I think they kind of went into the second round as kind of underdogs. They were underdogs, and then they went in with that chip. The first thing Rick said to his team in the post game was, you know, everyone had written us off, but we are alive and kicking. And I'll just be curious to see if they've come into this game with that similar mindset. So if they come out and they play with the same intensity they played Saturday, they have the shots going down. I mean, honestly, I don't expect Conwan to do what he did again. I would like to see Josiah Jordan-James maybe have a big game. Obviously, Vescovy was awesome as well. Not just from a shooting standpoint. I thought distributing the ball, he was really good, taking care of it. He was really good at that. And I think that's where the keys lie in this game tonight. So we'll have to wait and see. I can now that Kansas State game's over now, I can kind of feel the anxiety rising. But hey, this is what you play for. You want to be playing right now in the second weekend and have the pressure. So we'll see if they can handle the Florida Atlantic Owls tonight. And in a way, I know it's not the same team. This almost feels like a full circle moment from Loyola Chicago. Think about it, because that was one of our best teams. That whole bracket had collapsed, and we lost to Loyola. And in this similar situation, I think the whole bracket has kind of collapsed for us. But now you got to find a way to get through Florida Atlantic. So that's what's making me a bit nervous thinking back to what happened in 2018. But hey, every game is tough this time of year. No game is supposed to be easy in this Sweet 16. And we'll see if the basketballs are up to the task. Well, what do you think about tonight's game?
I think it's going to be harder than the Vols fans think. I think it's going to be a close matchup. But I think it all depends if Tennessee can produce offensively. We know we can play defensive. We can have good defense. And definitely Olivier Comwa definitely is our main player in this tournament. Hopefully he can stay hot as he did against Duke. That's what I hope for. And I feel Tennessee can make it to the Final Four this year because, as I said earlier, the one thing good about this team is that there was a lot of doubts in the regular season. But think about it. When they had their biggest game on the season against the number one team in the country, Alabama, and they got a good win. So maybe this team is the kind of teams that I've seen in soccer so many times that when they play our mid team, kind of like a team that is not bad, but it's not a challenging team, they kind of don't produce as well they should. When they are tasked with in the biggest spot, they rise up. That's what I see this Vols team.
Yeah, I mean, they have been really good all year. I mean, think about it. They won the preseason Atlantis tournament as well. And a situation, because remember, the week before they went to Atlantis, they lost in Nashville to Colorado, a team that went to the NIT this year and had just lost to Grambling 2 days before. They turned around and beat what was it? It was Butler, USC, and Kansas in 3 straight days to win that preseason tournament. And it's been kind of the Jekyll and Hyde all year. But hopefully they remain the Hyde here tonight. So we'll definitely, with the game about to start, provide updates. I personally, and not just from a subjective standpoint, I do pick the Vols here. But, wait and see. Obviously, if we win tonight, it's one of the biggest wins in school history again. I mean, I'll say I'll be curious to get your take on this. I think the win over Duke is one of, if not the biggest win in school history. But obviously, it depends on what we do with it. Like, if we lose tonight, then it really meant nothing to beat Duke on Saturday, But if you, parlay that into a run, then that game was just massive.
Oh, definitely. It's a massive game, and I'll be definitely watching. To be honest, though, I want to finish the pod before the game starts because I definitely don't want to miss this big game, and not only in Tennessee basketball's history, probably in Knoxville's basketball history, because making to the Elite Eight is something the program has did once. Maybe they can finally break that barrier before the Final Four, and it all starts tonight. So let's real quick dive into other stories into the American side of things.
Right. The one team I really wanted to talk about, of course, I had a whole bunch of topics here. We can save some of these for later. The one team I really wanted to discuss was Purdue. Because I think this was the single biggest upset in the history of March Madness. Their loss to Farley Dickinson, only the second 1 seed to ever lose to a 16 seed. I'm going to be honest with you. Purdue, if you look at their history, they lost to 16 Farley Dickinson this year, lost to 15 St. Peter's the year before last, and then lost to 13 North Texas 2 years ago. I think Matt Painter should be facing some serious heat. Because, yeah, winning all the regular season games is fine and all. But then you can't come out, especially with the best center in the country, against the shortest team in the country and lose to them. I mean, what Purdue was doing the last 7 minutes of the game, against a lineup full of 6-footers with a 7-foot guy was shoot threes. I'm like, why are you not throwing the ball down to Zach Edey and letting him cook? It didn't make any sense. And if I'm a Purdue fan, I am outraged beyond belief still 6 days later.
Yeah, it's something, and great run for Farley Dickinson. But if you compare the infrastructure, the amount of players, the expectations, that makes into one of the biggest upset not only in college basketball history, in sports history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, FDU, they have I think 5 buildings or something. It's just very small. They won 4 games last year, and they didn't win their conference tournament this year. Got in on a technicality. So just an awful, awful loss for Purdue. Obviously, Arizona and Virginia also suffered bad loss. Like Virginia's last second play against Furman. You're up by 2, and you throw the ball down the court for no reason. It gets intercepted. Furman runs it back, hits the game-winning 3. One of the worst single plays I've ever seen in March Madness. I was just like, what in the world is Virginia doing? Terrible.
I know, but first of all, Marlon Biazzi, my man, I knew him back in the day in Santo Andre. Great tennis player. Thanks so much for watching. He said, "Congrats, my friend Gustavo. Thanks so much for watching Marlon Biazzi." But I was still couldn't believe because I picked Virginia to win it all, and there it is, losing in the first round.
Yeah, well, I picked Kansas, and they lost second round to Arkansas. Just a total collapse on their part to a team in Arkansas right now that's losing by 23 to UConn with 5 minutes left. No reason for them to lose that game, but hey, this is why we call it March Madness. Arizona as well, just that very disappointing loss for them, losing to Princeton. But Princeton, they dropped Missouri, which that was pretty funny because having to watch all the Mizzou fans who are idolizing Dennis Gates kind of defend that crap show was hilarious on Sunday. But hey, Princeton Sweet 16 tomorrow night against Creighton. That's pretty cool for them. And also Kentucky, our good friends in Kentucky are obviously they were eliminated by now the Elite Eight Kansas State, and that was a great game. It was an excellent game. Not an embarrassing loss for Kentucky. And obviously as a 6 seed, that's about as far as they're supposed to make it, right, with the bracket. But still, Kentucky fans are not very happy with Coach Cal. Still, not their expectations. They want to be in Final Fours, and right now they're just an okay program, and that's not good enough in Lexington.
Yeah, definitely. It's on the crossroad. It's that Coach Calipari. When enough is enough. That's why Kentucky fans are. I feel like when an SEC team wins at all, I think it's going to make Kentucky realize they are not the premier SEC basketball schools that they once were.
Yeah, and I think they have to realize too, kind of like how we had to with the Lady Vols on the women's side. It's just way more competitive now. It's the competition is way better now, and you're not going to dominate like you used to. So, they'll still be really good. They won't be elite, and that's gonna be a hard pill to swallow for Kentucky. Anyway, so real quick, to kind of wrap up the men's side of things, who do we think? So we already have Kansas State, and effectively we have Kansas State and UConn in the Elite Eight. I guess we're both taking Tennessee, right? And then in Gonzaga UCLA, which is going to be a great game too. Who's winning that one? I am on UCLA. I think the UCLA they've looked better to me. Gonzaga's kind of had some slow starts, and frankly, I don't trust Gonzaga in the tournament.
But maybe this year will be, yeah. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I'm picking UCLA.
All right. So we both have UCLA, UConn, and Tennessee, Kansas State on for tomorrow's games. We have Alabama, San Diego State in the South, 5v1. I'm going to take Bama. As San Diego State's pretty good, but I think Alabama will take care of them.
Yeah, I think that too.
And then on their opposite side, we have 15 Princeton and 6 Creighton. Can Princeton keep the Cinderella run going?
Oof, I'll take Creighton.
Yeah, I'd take Creighton. I think this might be a hot take. Creighton could beat Alabama on Sunday. I really do. I think that's a very dangerous game for Alabama if it plays out as Creighton, Alabama. And then in the final region, we have 5 Miami, who beat Indiana, a team I had picked to go to the Final Four. I like Indiana basketball to me. Just they're now in that legion of chronic chokers, like former elite program, but they cannot do anything in March anymore. They just can't. But anyway, that Miami versus Houston, who survived getting a screwed draw, having to basically play a road game in Birmingham, and they held Auburn to 4 field goals. So I'm rolling with Houston.
That second half defense of Houston was a masterclass. Auburn
absolutely
couldn't do anything. By the end of the game, they looked so exhausted. They were just giving turnovers away.
Yeah, it was probably the most impressive I've been with any team. I think Houston and Tennessee are the 2 most impressive teams, and Kansas State are probably the 3 most impressive teams so far with some of the performances they've pulled off. But I'm going to go with Houston here.
I'm going to go with Houston too.
And then they will play the winner of Xavier and Texas. Both of these teams have had to survive some tough games, but they are here. I'm personally going with the Longhorns. I want to see Houston, Texas in the Elite Eight.
I'll agree with you.
All right, let's pick our Final Four. So first up would be Kansas State and Tennessee. Will the Vols... You know what? I picked them to go to the Final Four in the show, and I'm going to stick with it. Give me the Vols. Trying to think. In our other Final Four, it would be UCLA and UConn. You know what? UConn's that program where if they get hot in March, they're very hard to beat. I'm going with the Huskies. It feels like the Huskies right now are destined for a Final Four appearance.
One of the last time they made it was 2011 when Butler was coached by Brad Stevens.
Correct. Well, 2014 they won as well in 2014. So it just feels like a classic UConn run. I'm going with Connecticut.
Me too.
Okay, so on Sunday we would have Creighton, Alabama, and I'm going with Alabama, but beware time. Beware.
I think it's going to be overtime. Overtime. Alabama overtime.
And then Houston, Texas, who I've been doubting Houston, but I'm not going to doubt them anymore. I like Houston to win here.
I'm going to go with Houston.
All right, so that means our Final Four matchups would be Alabama, Tennessee, and then Houston, UConn. I mean, just think about how you would have an American Conference matchup on one side. Well, actually, wait, no, UConn's in the Big East now. Never mind. But Houston, UConn, Tennessee, Alabama. Who would advance to the title game there? I'm going with I will have to go with Alabama, Houston.
Tennessee, UConn.
Ooh. Oh, could you imagine? So there's a chance we might get Tennessee, UConn this weekend on the women's side in the Elite Eight. And then what if we got the men's version of that on the other side? For me, I would pick Houston over Alabama. And then who would you pick with Tennessee, UConn?
UConn.
All right. So you got Utah. I've got Houston now as champions. Of course, we'll revisit next week when we actually have the actual Final Four here. But yeah, it's going to be phenomenal. Quickly, on the women's side, Lady Vols are storming right now. They blew out St. Louis and Toledo in the first 2 rounds, easily cruising to the Sweet 16. They now get a rematch with number 1 Virginia Tech, a team they lost to by 3 points earlier in the season. I am very confident. I don't know if I'll say very, but I am confident. I think the Vols are going to win this thing in Seattle. This team is clicking offensively. Virginia Tech hasn't been really impressive. I mean, they only scored 58 against Chattanooga in their first round. I really like the Lady Vols.
If they make it to this year, it shows that Kelly Harper is legit because she needs this big run. I'm taking Lady Vols.
Yeah, and absolutely. And if they win on Saturday against Virginia Tech, UConn is likely waiting for them on Monday night for the Elite Eight, which that would be just, that would be massive. I mean, that would be that could be the program is back moment right there if you beat UConn to go to the Final Four. And that'll be tough. I still wouldn't pick that to happen, but I think this team could pull it off. I think they have that potential. But we'll just have to wait and see. Some other quick notes from around Knoxville. Spring football started this week. Not much to report there. Nico, he's clearly trying to gain some weight, obviously, to take the beating. They say Deontay Forden is very fast. There's been a lot of young players that have really stood out. But in the Fox Sports poll that came out this week, the Vols are ranked preseason number 5, which is just insane. It's not that insane. The Vols could be that good. Obviously, the orange and white game's here in a couple weeks on April the 15th. And, with our offense, you're not going to get a really good read on our defense here. You're not going to know until the season if our defense is truly any better. But, obviously, we're going to let Josh Heupel and his staff cook here in this offseason. If you had any thoughts on the spring football? I can't hear you guys.
Hold on, I'm trying to juggle too many things at once. But I'm excited about this to see this Vols team. Of course, they are under a lot of the expectations from what they achieved last season. Winning the Orange Bowl, being the number 1 team in the country, getting this close to the national championship, at least to the playoffs. If it was, all the Vols fans are like, if it wasn't for one bad Saturday night in South Carolina, but they have to keep that momentum going. That's going to be the challenge for Josh Heupel. And I'm eager to see what the fans are going to be showing up in the orange and white game, because that's the first home game since that streak, since that South Carolina loss, since the Orange Bowl win.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a great time. I'm trying to get up there. It's only $5 to get in. People have been complaining about that. It's $5. I'll pay it.
So it's not free anymore?
No, it's $5.
I thought it was $5 for premium seats and the rest was free.
Yeah, I think all of it now is $5, unless they've increased the premium seats too. But
from what I see, was $5 like premium seats, but I remember the last orange and white game I went was the last year of Butch Jones, and they didn't finish the orange and white game because of the rain.
Yeah,
but it's a nice time. I feel like it's more like a showcase, and the fans are going to be showing up because they are excited. Finally, they're true excitement, not like, oh, we like the football team. No, we have a legit coach.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely this is the first offseason where I'm like, okay, we belong in the SEC for real. Now just what's our ceiling? And we still haven't figured that out yet. And that'll be the question to be answered in the next couple of years, and that'll have to be recalibrated most likely when Texas and OU come into the conference. But obviously we have way more time to talk about college football later. I do want to bring up this quick point, though, from Tuscaloosa, our good friends down at the University of Alabama. Nick Saban, he suspended Tony Mitchell. He's a freshman defensive back. He was driving 141 miles an hour with marijuana in his car. Not a smart thing to do in the Southeast. But credit to Saban, he immediately suspended him. And then in his press conference, he uttered the line, "There's no such thing as the wrong place at the wrong time." And what a lot of people are considering a homage, or an unfair homage at least, to the basketball coach Nate Oates, who said that Brandon Miller was at the scene with the Darius Midle, at least alleged murder scene. Wrong place at the wrong time. What do you think about that down in Tuscaloosa? The apparent infighting, it seems.
Nick Saban, as humble as he tries to appear, his ego is so big. He might be fear of being overshadowed by the basketball coach, which he never thought in a million years would have happened in the University of Alabama.
Yeah, I think that has to play a part of it, because football school is a football school. And, even still right now, even with the ball's still in, talk to some people and they're like, well, Tennessee's a football school, and we're back to being a football school. But to me, it's like, okay, just because the football team's really good doesn't mean we can't have a great basketball team too. Like, I think a rising tide rises all ships. And we saw what happened with baseballs a couple years ago. And I think it's risen all the ships in Tennessee. The mood is here, and we believe we can win in any sport. So I'll be curious to see if the University of Alabama can kind of work out those kinks within their own athletic department. I'm sure it was a fun day down in the athletic department when they heard those lines. But, here's the thing, though. Nick Saban's that one coach that you can't really do anything to, because the people in Alabama are going to always side with Nick Saban, because he's basically a god in the state of Alabama,
Oh, he is. It's like, hey Nate Oates, I can poke at you at any time I want because I'm still the king in the state of Alabama. But
we have, and also just in terms of tip-off time, it's going to be 9:34 Eastern time, so 4 minutes from now. One last note from Knoxville, real quick. Baseball's got swept by Mizzou. They were outscored 23-6 in 3 games, their worst performance in years. I don't think it's panic time. Sometimes you just have bad weekends, and clearly this team is in a rebuilding year. They're trying to work out a lot of kinks. They still got a lot of talent. I'm not out on Tony Vitello. I think this team will turn it around, but they're just not going to be dominant like they were last year. But you know what? Last year's national champion, Ole Miss, was not dominant. In fact, they were an unranked team heading into the tournament, and they won it all. So I'd rather not be good now, but be good at the end of the season. So hopefully Tony V can get it turned around.
And, regular season, one thing, and I kind of compare it to the basketball Vols. They didn't do a good job as people expect in the regular season, and I feel like they're gonna have a good run in the playoffs in the March Madness. Maybe this also happens with the baseball Vols.
Oh, absolutely! Like, you just never know what's going to happen. Last thing I really want to touch on tonight before we wrap up, the World Baseball Classic. I'm totally in on this tournament. That thing was electric. It was so lit. The United States, they made a good run all the way to the title game. They had to come back against Venezuela. Trey Turner had to hit a grand slam to win there. They absolutely destroyed Cuba 14-2. But Shohei Ohtani and the Japanese proved they were the ultimate best team in the world, because Ohtani struck out Mike Trout, his teammate, and Japan win. So I guess my question for you guys, was this a failure for the United States? And did Shohei Ohtani prove he's the best right now? Because I think Shohei Ohtani easily is the best player in baseball. But I wouldn't go as far to say this is a failure for the U.S., because Japan has a lot of good players in that team. And I think going forward, we have to find a way to convince our best pitchers in the United States to play.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I saw some media personalities bitching about World Baseball Classic. That's stupid. It's like bitching about the World Cup. You want to represent your country. I thought it was, it's stupid. I thought America was all about nationalism and the U.S. flag and representing your country. What is the best way to represent your country? To play the sport that you're good at, to beat another country.
And I'm sorry, but the World Baseball Classic was more exciting than the majority of the MLB regular season. Like, that's just facts, And if you want baseball to remain a relevant sport, a fun sport, you should support the World Baseball Classic. That was the most fun I've had watching baseball in a very long time with that particular tournament, because those teams are so much better than what you get on a week-to-week basis in Major League Baseball. So I think it was a great tournament, and I'm glad it's gaining popularity. It sucks for Edwin Diaz and Jose Altuve that they got hurt. But hey, they could have gotten hurt in spring training, Like, this whole idea of, the players are going to get hurt, they play the World Baseball Classic. Well, I mean, spring training, they're playing baseball. They could get hurt there. People get hurt in football practice. People get hurt playing in basketball practice,
Yeah. No, and players can get hurt doing, like, Madison Bumgarner was hurt driving. I don't remember what he was driving, but he got injured outside of baseball, for God's sake.
I mean, Chase Elliott recently in NASCAR, he was snowboarding. He wasn't racing. He injured his leg snowboarding. Yeah,
but on top of all, Great World Baseball Classic, it's something the Major League Baseball was a home run. They know they have to promote their league internationally, especially to attract young players. Like, I saw a pitcher from Nicaragua already got a Major League Baseball deal. Major League Baseball want to find, my Major League Baseball teams should look at this as like, oh my God, we can watch talent from all over the world coming to US that we can see, and we can maybe find some good player that we didn't know about. That's amazing for Major League Baseball teams.
Yeah, there's a lot of those Japanese players that should be getting looks in the MLB, because I know obviously Shohei Ohtani is the Michael Jordan of Jordan, the Michael Jordan of Japan. But you can't win alone. As we see with the Angels, you can't win alone. And I'm just very excited to see what he gets in the open market this offseason, because they're saying his contract's going to start at the lowest in $500 million. He could get $600 or $700 million.
Oh yeah, Shohei Ohtani is one of a kind talent. I think when he returns to Japan, he's going to be a superstar. What he's doing is phenomenal. And I think the Angels got too small for him. He should go to a Dodgers, to the Yankees, where the legit title contender are. Not stuck with the Angels and see. Like, Shohei Ohtani should see his colleague, Mike Trout, which was undeniably a great hitter, but his career is coming year after year without any shots of getting a title.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that the at-bat he had on Tuesday night was the biggest at-bat of his entire career, because he hasn't played in October, like, ever. And I think that's kind of what, when people think of Mike Trout, they think, oh, guy with good stats but never does anything because he's never in the postseason. Shohei Ohtani showed that he was clutch and that he can win on a big team if he were given that opportunity.
Yeah, that's why LA, the Dodgers and the Yankees should throw the kitchen sink, should give any money. Like, and the Yankees struggle with have this kind of clutch. Like, the last time I feel like the Yankees had really clutch pitchers were Mariano Rivera and Roger Clemens. After that, the Yankees did not have any like really true clutch pitcher.
Absolutely. So it definitely congratulations to Japan and Shohei Ohtani. But boys and girls, it's basketball time in Tennessee. They're about to tip off the game from Madison Square Garden. So I think it is about time for us to wrap up here. And we'll see y'all on the other side. Hopefully, we're celebrating a historic accomplishment for Tennessee basketball. A lot on the line here for the basketballs. So for Gustavo Tomazeli down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, I'm Nicholas Hill, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States. Once again, thank you to our great guest, Jason, play-by-play announcer. Check him out. for Atlanta United as they played the Columbus Crew this Saturday evening. But you've been listening to Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. This edition was recorded on March 23rd, 2023. The only podcast that covers both American and Brazilian sports. Have a great night and go Vols.